All right, our second reader is a neurobiologist by training. His second book, American Sfumato, a novella in 9 stories, was published in Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovenia, and is being considered for the Mesa Selimovic Prize, the most prestigious annual award for a novel published in Bosnia, Croatia, Montenegro, and Serbia. The book was also a bilingual project, with 4 stories appearing or about to appear in U.S. literary journals. He also wrote a few movie scripts and published translations of Charles Simich's poetry. He lives in Evanston with his wife and their 2 sons. Please welcome Vojislav Pejovic.
Thank you. Open with the joke, open with the joke. So here it is. Literature is no laughing matter. Thank you. So I wish this was a funny book. It is not. It is, though, a book where a main character does this mosaical reminiscing of his life, and a lot of it has to do with where I come from, which is former Yugoslavia, which in the 90s, if you remember the bad news, went through this whole kind of civil war thing. And so in order to better highlight the struggles of my protagonist, I reached for this brand new narrative tool called the villain. And yeah, I heard about it in the face. And so my villain is actually this very unsavory character who managed to insert himself in the top echelons of Serbian politics in the 90s. But he's not from Serbia, he's from the valley, right around the LA. And so on mom's side, he's of Montenegrin origin, he's on the Anglo-Saxon side of his father's origin. And what happens is he became a plastic surgeon. Not only that, he's a plastic surgeon who happened to be a Pentecostal preacher because he found God while studying at UCLA. There's a meaning. And then, though, he started practicing those 2 things together. So he opened a clinic called Leap of Faith Clinic and Spa and church. And then IRS started bringing down his neck because obviously he was reporting his clinic income as contributions of church members. So he had to flee. And this is the segment of the story of him on the lam in Brazil under an assumed name. It's a sad book. Dr. Ignacio Montenegro keeps to himself for the first year or 2. He spends very little time in the Salvador apartment he purchased as M.F. Busley, alias F.D. Job, alias T.L. Lukic, via several intermediaries. Instead, he settles in Chapada Diamantina, deep in the Bahia countryside, in a decrepit village hut that cost him close to nothing. There, he introduces himself as Dr. Frederick Job, an American who fell in love with many splendors of the region and decided to spend the rest of his life there. He applies himself as only few are able to, and soon begins speaking like a local. He even starts performing duties of a local physician, everything but childbirth. Dense ginger curls spread across his face like keratinous ivy. To his quiet delight, he notices that the lesions on his skin are no longer visible. In his free time, he hikes the area, rests on treetops, sleeps in caverns or in a small military tent given to him by one of the villagers in gratitude for closing up a foot wound that wasn't healing for years. Not long afterward, he acquires another piece of cheap property on the very coast where a wooden hut is soon erected, which he names O Paraíso. He spends a month or 2 there each year, sitting on an empty beach, staring at the Atlantic, fantasizing about sharing those moments with a good, faithful, fruit-bearing woman, an embodiment of beauty, someone sublime and refined, with a name as seductive and filled with promises of bliss as his childhood love, Nancy Villanova. After nearly 3 years in the wilderness, Dr. Ignacio Montenegro returns to his small apartment in Salvador and realizes with elation that the neighborhood he had chosen in haste is full of social climbers and actually perfect for a small clinic dedicated to personal improvement, which he then purchases from a local practitioner of plastica who was approaching retirement. Thanks to the reasonable prices, modernization efforts advertised in the local press, and the masterful, some would even say divinely guided touch of the new mysterious bearded surgeon from Chapada Diamantina, the clinic Belleza Eterna becomes a local phenomenon. For the most part, Dr. Montenegro keeps to himself, but the rumors have it that one of his ancestors was a Slavic hero priest, slain by the Turks in the 19th century, and another a sailor on the Beagle who got off the ship in Salvador in the time of the ship's most famous passenger, of whom Dr. Montenegro doesn't think much, he makes that much clear, wrote the following, and this is actual excerpt from Charles Darwin's diary. "For the first time in my life, I saw the sun at noon to the north. I'm constantly surprised at not finding the heat more intense than it is when at sea and with gentle breeze blowing one does not even wish for colder weather. I'm sure I have frequently been more oppressed by a hot summer's day in England." Within 5 years, Dr. Montenegro becomes the most sought-after plastica expert in Bahia. His reputation begins to swell and spread like a surf wave, and invitations to join professional associations, both local and national, and attend conferences and workshops start flooding his mailbox. Such popularity fills him with both pride and unrest, and he cannot find peace even among the fellow Pentecostals, whose ecstatic tongues sound nearly identical to those heard in the churches of the Valley or LA, places he now recalls only vaguely. He's also somewhat disturbed by the fact that he's not visited by visions anymore, but by men in dark suits passing by the clinic, day or night. And his mother's voice is distant and unfocused. He can practically see her sitting on the other side of the line, staring at the courtyard pines, mumbling some slobbery syllabi to her black-robed caregiver. Sister Janice is always kind to Dr. Frederick Job, Mrs. Busley's cousin from Detroit. She admires him for calling long distance so often, especially since Mrs. Busley's own son seems to have forgotten his mother completely. He's on the lamp, so he has to cover his tracks. Once more, Dr. Montenegro shifts to the survival mode like a rodent that keeps to himself, to the shaded areas of life that he now understands a little better. To shake the men in dark suits off his tail, Dr. Montenegro registers for the annual meeting of Brazilian breast augmenters and reducers. That's true. Announces his week-long absence from the clinic and purchases an airplane ticket to Rio and back. A few days later, in the window seat of a plane that approaches not Rio, but Belém, 1,000 miles in the opposite direction, he cannot but smile. He may be doing it in wonder at the sight of the mighty Amazon Delta below, but more likely he just thinks of the faces of people in dark suits as they examine the contents of a piece of luggage in the restroom of an airport restaurant. He pictures them rushing in, guns aloft, wondering what could possibly take a man so long, and then discovering in one of the stalls a deep purple suitcase they've been keeping in their sight all morning. He practically sees them ripping it open and then realizing that it's empty, save for the familiar Hawaiian shirt and a pair of khaki trousers and handful after handful of prickly, freshly cut ginger curls. In the port of Belém, Dr. Montenegro mails several pages of typewritten instructions to his assistant surgeon in Salvador, advising him to burn them after reading. He's confident that his junior colleague will do as asked, because the proposed deal would benefit them both, especially the young doctor, ambitious and of humble means. He then boards the nondescript freight vessel bound for Cape Town, South Africa. At the open sea, he cautiously congratulates himself for outrunning the pestilent human law yet again, and spends the few clear nights staring at the starry splendor above. The remainder of the 4-week trip he finds himself barricaded in the officer's command room, a move forced by one raging storm after another. In the bluish haze of tobacco smoke and alcohol vapors, he meets Voin, a radio operator who, when inebriated, can't stop babbling about A, his prostitute girlfriend in Hamburg, Germany, B, his home country, by the name of Yugoslavia, where, unless there's a massive interference in radio signals, the civil war is about to break out, and C, names of academics, apparatchiks, bank executives, bishops, dentists, former dissidents, generals, literature professors, police chiefs, poets, at least a handful, psychiatrists, at least 2, warehouse supervisors, writers, several handfuls, zoo managers, all involved in a mass murder scheme that has yet to claim its many victims. In the same haze-filled room, Dr. Montenegro befriends Jeff, a deputy security officer. Despite his voluminous belly and disheveled appearance, Jeff appears to be a true connoisseur of the human form, particularly female. He recites the differences in size and proportions between the most admirable fashion models, past and present, with ease and astounding precision. Astonishingly, in addition to their addiction to beauty, Jeff and Dr. Montenegro also happen to share a Montenegrin ancestry, with Jeff actually being somewhat conversant in the language of their forefathers. Dr. Montenegro is intrigued by these coincidences, but even more by the fact that Jeff chose to reveal those details to him and not to Vojin, with whom he could have actually practiced his ancestral tongue. This alerts Dr. Montenegro to a couple of important points, not least among them the fact that Jeff is a bit like him, a person of dedication and intelligence, yet a careful one, someone who surveys his surroundings carefully and is not led astray by impulses of the moment. Their friendship is sealed one particularly stormy and drunken night when, on their way to the cabins, Jeff asks the doctor whether he believes in God. He also mentions that his spiritual meanderings keep bringing him to Orthodox Christianity, the faith of the old country, a subject Dr. Montenegro does not know much about, but agrees is worth looking into. In Cape Town, the passenger and the officer remain on land, united in something better than a plan, a shared vision, a production-worthy script in which they both play stars, a promise of a promised land. Thank you.